Welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we inform, encourage, and support Christian indie writers on their journey to publication. I'm Jamie Hirschberger. I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
I'm Jennifer Carl Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
I'm Christina Catane, and I write Christian fantasy.
And we're short one host today. Miss Rhonda is not available to join us, but she writes in multiple genres, including nonfiction under the pen name Dee Bowman. We miss you, Rhonda, and we'll see you next week.
I keep intending to put her head on a stick.
I found her head on a stick. Remember how, all right, so the reason I'm up here, as you can see, I'm not, or you don't know it's up, but I'm in my dining room because our basement flooded a few weeks back and we still don't have my office back together. And as I was like having to throw things away, I found her head on a stick. And it was ruined.
Did you bring it to?
No, it was ruined. I felt so bad.
That all sounds really strange. We're talking about a paper cutout of somebody's head that we would put on a stick, because the first time Jennifer had to miss a podcast, we made a fake Jennifer, a puppet, so to speak. We want to thank you all for tuning in. Everybody listening live, thank you. And also a big shout out to our listeners on iTunes or any of the other platforms on which we make our audio available. YouTubers, if you like what we're doing, remember to like and subscribe. The more likes that you give us, the more other writers will find our podcast. So please help spread the word by just giving us a thumbs up.
Yeah, we were just talking before we went live about like our commitment level and how we really want to see this podcast grow. And there's only so much the four of us can do, but all of you really can make a difference. So if you've never shared this podcast on social media, if you've never told a friend about it, if you've never liked or subscribed, please do so. Honestly, you guys sharing with other Christian writers, that's what's going to grow this community and what's going to help this podcast. So we'd appreciate that very much.
Absolutely. Definitely. And we would like to think that our content gives a lot to people, but our live chat is amazing. So if you're only listening and you are available at 10 a.m. Eastern, jump into our live chat and ask your questions, because so many of the people who join us are just chock full of wisdom. Okay. You can also go over to our website and subscribe to our newsletter. That'll ensure you never miss a single episode of the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. So we start every episode with a segment we call What's Up, where we go around the virtual table and ask each of the hosts, what's up with you? So what is up with you, Jen?
Well, first, I just want to skip over really quick to our chat. Leah is here. Good morning, Leah.
Good morning, Leah. Hey, Maria.
From across the pond. Good morning, Maria. So glad to have you here. Good morning, Liz. Piper's here as well. Good morning. And look who else we have here.
Aww.
Rhonda says, good morning. I'm taking a sick day, but can't give up these ladies. Aw, I miss you, Rhonda. So my what's up? I don't know. We were talking before about Jamie and I were talking about like waitresses and like just the whole job of it and how like old guys can treat them, whatever. And I told her that I had heard once, and I think it was a waitress talking about that you can tell a famous person's integrity or who, if they're a good person or not, if they look at their waiter or waitress. And I was like, oh, because it really checked me, because there are so many times that we'll be halfway through the meal and I'm like, all right, which one is our waitress? Now here we've gone through the whole ordering and like that, and it never really occurred to me like that was like completely rude, right? So we had this whole conversation because, like, in my defense as a mom, like I don't just go in and sit down, what do I want to eat? Ladies, right? We don't do that. We go and we sit down and we're like, all right, what are you gonna have? What are you gonna have? Like, we figure out what everyone's gonna have, because if we don't, when that poor waitress shows up, it's chaos. Like, no one's gonna know if mom doesn't like make sure it's all like down to the drinks. What are you having for drink? Okay. What is your side? Like all that stuff. And so in my defense, like I'm pretty busy when we're at a restaurant, but still that was a check for me. Like, do you guys ever think about that? Like, do you look at your waiter or your waitress when you go to a restaurant?
I'm usually with my husband and he starts full on conversations, like not about what we're going to eat. Like, so he like makes sure he knows their name. because they usually have a name tag on, and like there'll be like a conversation before we ever get to like, what are you drinking or whatever. So I just kind of sit back and go with the flow.
Jen, I think I would have answered similarly to you in the past and wondered, but from the other perspective, now that I'm waiting tables, I am careful to really notice my customer. Like if I say, how are you guys today? I try to actually look them in the eye and recognize that there's an individual sitting there when I'm asking the question, instead of just kind of, okay, what can I get for you? You know, so it goes both ways, I would say.
Yeah, I never have waited tables, so that might affect the way that I am at the restaurant. But I also was raised, my dad, not a very social person, but he's very observant. And but my grandfather, who I spent a lot of time with growing up, was a pastor, just like Tina's husband is. And my uncle, we always called him the mini celebrity because we couldn't go anywhere in the state without him seeing somebody that he knew. It was just weird. Like they were like that too. So maybe it's just being raised like that, being the person as a little girl, just sitting there and knowing that someone else is taking care of that I never had to like pay attention because it was some other conversation that I wasn't part of. I don't know. It's interesting. So I just want to like put that out there. If this is something you never thought about, next time you go to a restaurant, purposely make eye contact, purposely like look at your waitress or waiter and realize that they are a real person. They're not just there just like to take your order and bring you food, and just see if it makes a difference in your experience. It'll make a difference in their experience. I would say that's just my little experiment. So
I would agree, because then you won't yell at the wrong girl, hey, you didn't bring me my refill. And then the girl is like, sorry, but it wasn't me. So yeah.
All right, we have an active chat today. Leah says, I can do that. It's currently in a whoops. What? Sorry, I clicked the wrong one. All right. I saw her what's up and I just clicked the wrong one. Sorry. She says redecorating her office, waiting for her editor to finish the book, and getting antsy to start the next book.
Yes. Take your break, Leah. Leah was saying how between books she needs to get some self-care kind of stuff, and you know, because she puts a lot of pressure on herself to meet these self-imposed deadlines. So I'm just gonna kind of kick her butt a little bit and tell her to enjoy and take her break. It's very well deserved.
I need to take that advice too.
Yes.
Piper says, what's up? Prepping for 20 Books Conference. I'm so jealous. Working on book 4, doing a lot of research more than getting lots of words done. Okay, that's good too. Research is work too. And Maria says her what's up. As usual, been working on her historical fiction. Got to 86,000, 95,000 if you include the scenes that she's cut. Yeah, I count that. And also she's been doing Preptober for her Nano project. Good for you.
Is it just me, or do you guys feel a whole lot better about the concept of cutting almost 10,000 words than you did when you started writing? Like to me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, 10,000 hard-won words, and she just cut them.
Yeah.
Like, but the more you do it, the easier it is. But yes, at first you're like, oh, like I think that God knew that I needed book 3. He knew that I needed Phoebe's book to be as painful as it was, because now like it's no big deal to me if I have to cut a bunch of words because I can write more words. Right? Was it Johnny Cash you said? No, it was Willie Nelson. Like he just wrote a song and gave it away for a beer. And he's like, I can write another one. So it's kind of the same thing. I can throw those words away because I can write more. Right?
That's true.
It does make it easier. One more quick. Liz says her what's up is slowly doing NaNoWriMo prep. Good for you, Liz. Good for you. I'm excited. I
should mention that if you can't go to Vegas, which is where 20 Books is, you can do it. You can register for the virtual to watch it virtually, and that's no cost.
Really?
I don't think I paid anything. I just registered.
I'm registered also. 20 Books to 50K is the conference that we're talking about. They are going to have a virtual option.
When is it?
It's November-ish. Sorry, you nailed the non-detail girl.
The 8th, I think, or something like that.
So here's my thing. Virtual, I just don't know that I'll show up because of life.
Right.
But like maybe if I made myself accountable to you girls and we had to show up together on a stream, not like we can't stream it, but like we would show up together and watch it together. Maybe I
That's a
would
good
do
idea.
that.
Yeah, because then it's kind of like we're all showing up in the room to attend. That's a really good idea because I need a little bit of accountability for that too. Because aside from 10 to 12, right now I've been kind of like writing time is done.
Yeah. Piper's saying, yeah, it's the November 8th through the 12th.
All right. And then you can watch the recorded videos.
So we have to have a powwow and decide which ones we want to watch together because there's like multiple ones in each time slot. And then you have to pick one. So.
Oh, I want to have a powwow just because I want to say powwow.
Leah's in on the powwow too. She says she she thinks a watch party is a good idea. So
all right,
we'll see.
Okay, we'll see what we can come up with. All right, I'll do my what's up next. Jen, can you help me out? What I would want to share with you guys is something that I can't even believe there are other people with a brain that works like mine sometimes. And here we go. You see these words here. If you're listening, I'll read them for you. It says 12 more words to pronounce as if they were the names of Greek heroes. Now I won't read all 12. But for example, the word articles, it's spelled Articles. Well, when I look, articles, exactly. Yes. And then if you see icicles, isicles, reptiles, reptilis or reptilis or whatever. But anyway, when a word ends in an les, oftentimes I will want to say it in that kind of a strange way. And if you just kind of blurt out with that sort of thing, people typically don't get you what you're trying to say. But I probably articles is one that I recognized immediately. Article is how I've been saying it inside my own head for like ever.
My girls are going to love this. They are so into Greek mythology right now and Percy Jackson books. They love those books. So that's so funny.
I just wanted to share that as my what's up today. Something a little bit fun. All right. And what's up with you this beautiful morning, Bambina?
Well, I couldn't think of anything that was that important except yesterday. My daughter and my favorite son-in-law,
the only one,
got the keys to their very first house that they actually own.
Yay!
And they let me tag along with them to go out to the new house and get the keys. And so it's just such a cute little place. It has like a real cottage in the woods kind of feel. Mm-hmm. And so and they have like almost 3 acres and a lot of it is wooded. And I was teasing my son-in-law because he calls me favorite mother-in-law. So that there's plenty of room for a mother-in-law house in the woods.
Now it is so cute, the house anyway, but the house has just recently been redone from top to bottom. And nice choices made. It is so cute inside. But that's not even the best part about the house, Tina. You've not told the best part about the house.
Well, I just thought I'd let you tell them.
The best part about this house is it's 2 miles from me. 2 miles. 2 miles from me. So it's very exciting. I actually drove down there when Tina was there and got a little tour of it with them. No, they haven't even moved in yet. They just signed yesterday. And it is, I agree with Tina. It is the cutest house. It's much bigger inside than it looks on the outside. And it's just perfect for them and to grow into. And yeah, I'm very excited for them. And I'm very excited they're just down the street from me.
What wonderful news. And I know Tina's been bursting, wanting to tell us, but she kept the secret. We got to give her some props.
I'm so horrible at keeping secrets. And my daughter, and they've been waiting for so long because my son-in-law is a disabled vet. And so they were doing a VA loan. And there's only like 4 VA inspectors in the state of Michigan.
Wow.
And so it took forever for the VA. They had the first inspection and that was fine, but they were just waiting forever for the VA inspector to have time to come and do it. So it's been months. It's been like, can I tell them yet?
I know. She's just like, oh, I have a secret, but I can't tell you. And we'd all like, we're terrible because we would try to guess. And she'd be like, I can't tell you.
And it's like so exciting too, because like at least in our state, I don't know if it's like nationwide, my word, Jen, that it's hard to get houses right now. There aren't enough houses for people that are looking for. So for them to find this house, put an offer and get the house, like it just worked out so well for them. So I'm so happy.
It really did.
That's a great what's up. How awesome. We got lots of yay for the kiddos in and then Piper says she has friends who always pronounce fragile as fragile.
I'm one of those friends. That's me.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. All right. So we got through all of the what's up. So next we're going to dive into our topic du jour, which is how to plot a fantasy. So first of all, what makes a fantasy story a fantasy story? Who wants to answer that question?
I can. It's anything that has any kind of supernatural, magical, fantastical, or imaginary element to the story. So it could be normal people living in a magical world, or magical people living in a magical world, or magical people living in a normal world. And when I say magical, I'm like any kind of supernatural, because like my book is considered a fantasy because my main character can see the spiritual world.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's a pretty handy working definition. I like it. And so we're going to get into what Jen,
just real quick. So then according to that definition, then both the Lord of the Rings series as well as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe are considered fantasy, right?
Yes.
Because you have the Lord of the Rings is totally a fantastical imaginary world, but then you have the C.S. Lewis writes with real people that go into a magical world. So all right.
Yes.
Cool. I always wondered how they were both labeled that way.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Piper says, sorry.
Yep,
Piper says that her book is considered a fantasy because people can shift into animals. Yes.
Yeah, stuff that would only happen in your fantasy, I suppose you would say.
Yeah,
like if you're going to sit and daydream and have an imagination. There are many fantasy subgenres. Read Z apparently lists 50 fantasy subgenres. Can you believe that? But Tina, you wanted to kind of pull out a few and talk about what they are. So did you decide these are like the most popular, the ones you'd heard of, or what?
These are the ones the most relevant to me.
So
it's kind of like, and I only did that because these are the ones I understand. And there are so many. Oh my gosh, there are so many. And like, I would just encourage you to go to Reedsy and look at them because it's just very diverse. And some of them bleed over into science fiction also. So, but there's two main categories: high fantasy versus low fantasy. So high fantasy is like a fantastical world.
Like and the whole thing is made up from your mind. The whole, like it's an imaginary place that doesn't even exist, etc.
Right. The gravity works backwards and the atmosphere is purple. Like you just made up a completely imaginary world. Low fantasy is the real world and people with supernatural abilities in that world. So, Superman, for example.
Okay, and so I think this is where my brain starts to be all, okay, because people would get on your case about not being able to give your book a genre. But I think in this realm, there's a little bit of like, but isn't this science fiction? Like if you have a reason that the atmosphere is purple, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like
it could be.
Yeah, so
science fiction and fantasy often bleeds into each other.
Got it. Okay. So you said high versus low is sort of like a main.
Yeah, those are like, usually you either have a high or a low fantasy.
And what is low fantasy?
Low fantasy is the real world, but the characters have some kind of magical, supernatural something about them.
Okay. Got it.
And so then there's epic fantasies, like, the dragons and the knights and they're really long and those kind of things. Christian fantasy is a genre. Dystopian, that's one that bleeds into science fiction. So it's in order to bleed into science fiction, there would have to be some sciencey, like technology. A lot of dystopian stories have advanced technology in them, and so they would fit into both categories. Mine is a dystopian, but there's no technology. Like it's the opposite of science fiction. So futuristic, so that's the future world. And so that can also often have advanced tech, but not always. So that's another one. Post-apocalyptic. And see, my book kind of falls into Christian, dystopian, futuristic, and post-apocalyptic. These are categories that I've actually used for advertising on Amazon, so that's why I kind of picked them. And so post-apocalyptic, the same thing, can also overlap with sci-fi. So I think of like some that post-apocalyptic movies I've watched recently where they were on another planet because the Earth was ruined, stuff like that. So, and then you have young adult, and so Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, and the Chronicles of Narnia fall into the subgenre of young adult fantasy.
Okay, so this is what's interesting to me because I was like, oh, dystopian. So my brain was like, so all dystopian is fantasy. But then when I see young adult, I know not all young adult is fantasy.
Right.
So is all dystopian fantasy?
I don't necessarily think it is.
Right, because I mean, you are.
It is imagining what the future world would be like, so it can fall into fantasy. Now, whether you want to market your book as a fantasy or in science fiction would depend on how science, like if you lean towards science fiction, you would want to choose that as your main category.
Because that's interesting, because I would have thought dystopian was like its own thing, but to see it as a subgenre of fantasy really makes sense to me. I just had never considered dystopian.
It's also a subgenre of science fiction, so.
Interesting. Very good. Very good info. So that's important to know for purposes of marketing your book, essentially.
Basically, correct? And when you put your book up on Amazon, they want you to pick categories, and you want your cover to match. This is like we've had multiple podcasts on how to make your book the most attractive to readers, and one of those things that we talk about is that your book should look like the genre that it's written in. And so if you're going to choose dystopian genre versus science fiction, those would be two different covers.
Yeah, and you spent a lot of time going back and forth and researching it and kind of playing around with the ideas because this was important to you as well. You knew that, you had to hit the right cover to match your book. And so I think that's a really good thing to bring up. So yeah, you did a good job with that.
Okay, so let's say you love fantasy, that you want to write an epic fantasy, a Christian epic, dystopian, futuristic, post-apocalyptic, young adult fantasy for your Nano project. Where do you even begin, Bambino? Where would you start trying to figure out how to do a fantasy for NaNoWriMo?
Well, I would start, and these two things are very closely tied together, the characters and the world. Build the world. And often developing the characters bleeds into building the world, because if your character has some kind of supernatural ability, how does that ability work in the world that they live in? So you have to know, so my character in my book can see this supernatural world, the spiritual world, the angels and the demons that are fighting for and against her as she goes on her quest. And I had to know, is this going to be a fantastical world that are going to have properties in it that affect her ability to see the spiritual world, or is she in the real world like the rest of us? And so she is in the real world like the rest of us in my book. But if we're writing a book where somebody could jump really high, and that was their ability, but the gravity works backwards there, you would need to know that.
Right. Because the rules of your universe will impact your character and the way that they react and the things that they do.
Yes.
Well, that makes sense to me. Okay, so your characters and world building are going to be kind of intermixed, and we're going to talk more about world building next week, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so then you want to move to your plot, possibly?
Yeah, it depends. Do you plot or are you pantser?
Right.
We've talked about this before. But I think you have to have a general idea if you're just going to sit down and start writing, that's fine, but you need to have some way to keep track of what is your world develops into. You need some way to keep track of that, and we'll talk about the rules in a minute. But each subgenre of fantasy has its own rules.
So you really need to know what subgenre you want to be writing in before you even start, right?
Yes, and I didn't know, and I had to find my genre after I was done writing, because I was a newbie and I didn't know that I needed to have a clear genre.
Yeah,
and started writing my book.
Right. And let me start right here by saying, if you're hearing this podcast and you've already started writing and you didn't know, don't stop. I mean, and if you don't figure it out by November 1st, don't not write your project, because absolutely everything that you write is going to benefit you, because you're going to discover about your characters and things that will probably make these things we're going to talk about easier for you. In fact, if you have a 50,000 word manuscript that you then have to go back and say, now, how does this fit? And you're going to have answers that you probably didn't have when you sat down to put your fingers to the keys. So just don't let any of this trip you up. That's all. Disclaimer before we go on.
And I was able to, through research, it took a little effort to find where my book fit and to market it accordingly.
Okay. So let's say that you're hearing this today and you want to make sure you're set up for success for NaNoWriMo. You're going to learn your rules, which, okay, Tina and I talked about this when we were outlining, and the dragon lore is like an example, which kind of irritated me one time. Is like, oh, I want to write kind of this thing about dragons. And I saw some chatter somewhere in a writer's group, and it was like about how, oh, they had dragons doing this, but everybody knows that dragons, blah, 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 blah. It's like, what? But sometimes hardcore readers of these genres do have expectations of you. I don't know what they are. I can't remember the specific things, but it's kind of like, this color dragon is this way. And I don't know if these are set by like famous people who wrote, like, so Lovecraft might have set the standard for particular horror elements. You see what I'm saying?
Right. And I think that dragon lore really kind of does come from Lord of the Rings. A lot of it does, like with the loving of gold and shiny things and like that. But it's not just dragon lore too. Like it's vampires and it's fairies, and like it's specific. I thought the same thing as you. I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cute to write a fairy story? Oh no. Like there's, and like fae is a word. I didn't even know it was a word. Like, so like, yeah. Like if you read a lot of fantasy, you're probably looking at us like, you guys are idiots. Like Judy and Jamie, but like, because we don't. So, but like, if you want to write fantasy, would you agree, Tina? You know, like you have to know the rules.
Yeah. And I'm sure Piper could tell us there are rules for shapeshifting.
Yeah, and Tina and I can't believe you brought up vampires, Jennifer, because I was like, what if I want to write a story about this guy who's a vampire who absolutely loves garlic, but can't get close enough to anybody to bite them because he always has garlic breath. And I don't know that vampire lore says that vampires can't be around garlic. Why should vampire lore hold me back from telling my vampire story? So,
well, I mean, you could write that, but you would just have to acknowledge somewhere in the story where somebody has to say, yeah, that's just made up for stories. Like you have to acknowledge that that all the things that people are expecting aren't happening in the story for a reason, because like, oh, that's just all made up for novels. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you could do it, but they're like, again, just like with romance, there are expectations, and you don't want to tick off your readers. If you want people to actually like your book in the genre that you're going to put it out in, you got to make sure you know the rules. So,
all right.
And so we don't have time to go through all of those rules today of all 50 of the subgenres of fantasy. But I can tell you that there is the big one that applies to every subgenre of fantasy, and that is, know the rules of your world and do not break them.
Right.
Yes.
So if you set your world up that gravity works backwards and people float up in the air instead of being pulled down to the ground, like they have to wear magnetic boots to keep them on the ground or something, then that has to be continuous. It has to be consistent, unless like something really like a disaster happens that like ruins it all. I mean, obviously you could do that, but you need to know, the rules need to be consistent. Whatever the magic system or the supernatural system or the whatever in your world has to be consistent. Don't break your own rules.
And I think that's why making a world building Bible can be handy. And
Right.
yeah.
And we're going to be talking about that next week.
Yeah.
If you're a pantser, you need to have a notebook or something you keep beside you. And when the rule presents itself, you need to write it down because you can't break it. So you don't want to forget about it.
Okay. All right. And then that's the one big rule. And then what? So you've gotten us this far, Tina. What's next?
Well, you have to choose a story structure.
Okay, that's where, like you said, you can't just ramble on and on. You've got to have like a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, usually fantasies are a little bit complicated, and it's easier to have a story structure, even if it's just like a loose grid work, to keep it all straight.
Okay.
And so you can choose a 3 or 4 act story structure. So if you want to know more about that, go look at our podcast we did on plotting romance, and that outline that Jennifer presented will work for any genre. You just have to tweak it a little bit. So whatever story structure you choose is okay, but that will determine your plot points. So like what Jennifer was saying in plotting a romance is she has disasters at the end of each act. And those are the plot points that go with that story structure. But like I used the hero's journey. And so my plot points are completely different than what Jennifer uses in a 3 or 4 act story structure. So since I use hero's journey, that's the one I thought I would just cover a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a hero's journey.
I never heard of it until you brought it up.
Right, and you can, and I'm so bad. I should have wrote down the guy's name. This guy wrote a book about the hero's journey, and it's Joseph Campbell, maybe. And it's like, it's old, but it's just epic. And so you can find all these articles and graphs and pictures of the hero's journey online. All you got to do is Google hero's journey and images, and you will find like these images with like everything plotted on a graph. It's usually a circle because the hero's journey is a circular journey. They start, right, Rhonda said Joseph Campbell, so I was right. So the first 25% of the hero's journey starts in the real world. And so this is Bilbo in the Shire. The Hobbit starts with Bilbo in his real world. Obviously, it's not our real world. And there's a call to action during this first 25%. There's a refusal of the call, and if you go and you can find the Hobbit plotted on a graphic if you Google it, like how the Hobbit meets each of these. So there's a supernatural aid or a mentor that comes along, which is Gandalf, that either mentors them or convinces them to accept the quest. And then they cross the threshold into the fantasy world, or the unknown world, as Joseph Campbell calls it. So your middle 50%, and you'll see the similarities to the 3-act structure here. The middle 50% of the book is in the unknown world. And there's actually 10 plot points that go in to that unknown world. So I don't want to go through each of them because they're complex. And so if you're interested, get the book or read an article. There's so much free information online that you can't really go wrong there. But these 10 plot points will entail multiple challenges that the character will face, antagonistic characters that are going to show up. The Abyss is it's what it's called. And so if you are familiar with The Hobbit, this is like Bilbo at his lowest point, and he's down under the ground, and then the Gollum is there. Like if you remember that part, that's Bilbo in the Abyss. A revelation, which leads to a transformation, which leads to atonement. So basically, now he's a different person. Now he's either gained his confidence, or he's really in on this quest where he wasn't before. Like he had accepted it, but he was kind of wishy-washy. So something like that happens. And so these are very, like, it's complicated. So you have to read the things to really understand them.
Because the hero isn't just going on a physical journey, he's also going on an internal journey.
There's a definite character arc going on in a fantasy with the character. It's not just the quest. In my book, it's to retrieve the New Testament. Angelica's quest isn't just to retrieve a physical book, but to find atonement for herself and for all the people in her village who don't know that the Messiah has come, or that there was even supposed to be a Messiah. And so and then there's her character arc of feeling like she's unforgivable and finding forgiveness at the end of the book. So, and the arc that she goes through. So there's all these things, and within that middle 50%, the hero will complete their quest or their goal. And it ends with that main character crossing back over the threshold back into their real world. So Bilbo returning to the Shire.
And that's why it's circular, because he ends up back where he started, even though he's changed.
Right. And so the last 25% of the book is back in the real world. And I have it in quotes and I keep going like this because it's the character's real world, not our real world. It could be a completely fantastical world, but it's the world the character is familiar with, their home world.
Gosh, doesn't 25% sound like a lot?
It does, but it really worked.
Yeah.
Because when Angelica gets back to her village with the New Testament, there was still a whole lot of stuff that was happening.
Yeah, to be resolved, things that were maybe left unfinished or whatever.
Right.
All right.
Okay, so the two plot points in the last 25% that are important. Master of two worlds. They can move between both worlds without consequence. So Bilbo is a hero in both worlds, and he lives in the Shire now. His friends from his journeys come to visit him every now and then. In the Bible, if you were to apply this, Christ's transfiguration on the mountain where God and Moses and Elijah come down, that's his master of two worlds moment, where he's in the spiritual and he's in the physical world at the same time. And then freedom to live. So this is Christ's resurrection and ascension into heaven, or Bilbo just settling in to live out his remaining years in The Hobbit. And so that's just like a really, really high overview of the hero's journey.
Yeah, a good exercise for the rest of Preptober would be for you to figure out the hero's journey, because it is so much to learn if you want to write fantasy. Yeah. I think we've had some really good chat here. Maria says one fantasy thing she thinks is helpful is not to dump loads of world building information onto people, have the details woven into the character's journey rather than 2 straight pages of details about the world. Yes, and our whole chat is blowing up with don't info dump on people.
Right, and, show, don't tell.
Yeah, that's
very important in a fantasy.
For any genre, but yes, in fantasy for sure. Okay, very good. So I think that pretty much exhausts our how to prepare for NaNoWriMo if you plan to write fantasy. What do you ladies think? Any further thoughts about that?
Just to make sure that everyone tunes in next week when we talk about your story Bible to help keep your story all together. We're going to be actually interviewing author Ben Wolf, who has published a book on the topic. So.
Yes. All right. There's some chat. Yeah, Leah is saying her story Bible's a mess after 9 books, so maybe she'll get some tips there. All right, so we're going to transition to everybody's favorite portion of the podcast. This is called the feeding of the backs. The what? Well, we used to say that we were giving feedback at writing group, and then when it was time to move on to the next person, we'd say, is your back well fed so-and-so before we moved on? So they really felt like they were getting enough information about how they did. These pieces, though, that we're going to give feedback about today were written just before we went live on the air. And in fact, if you want to see me actually creating mine, you can go over to our YouTube channel, and I stream every Friday between the hours of 9 and 10, whenever we get around to doing our writing sprint. And you can watch me write these sprints live. So that's cool to check out. And then we're going to read them here. And because we just wrote them and we haven't had time to polish them, we're going to give only positive feedback on these writing sprints. We encourage you to take a crack at our writing sprints. Set your timer for 15 minutes and write on the prompt du jour, which is what today, Jennifer? What is today's?
Whatever.
What? Are you sassing me?
No, not at all. That is the prompt today. In quotes, which means you have to use it. Whatever.
Whatever is today's prompt. So set your timer for 15 minutes and then make sure to tag us on social media because we'd love to see what you come up with. And it also gives you something to possibly put on your writer's blog. Okay. All right, Jen, what did you write for the prompt? Whatever.
All right, here we go. What should we have for dinner? It's my least favorite game to play, yet I have to play it every single day. I don't know, says my oldest child. Whatever, says my youngest with a shoulder shrug. Silence from the middle daughter. I turn to my husband. What do you want for dinner? Whatever, I don't care. I open the fridge door and stare. What about tacos? I don't like tacos, the first child says. I like tacos, says the baby. Silence from the middle. I return my attention to the refrigerator. Okay, what about spaghetti? Okay, the first child says excitedly. I'm sick of spaghetti, the youngest child moans. We always have spaghetti. The middle child looks up from her laptop and silently wrinkles her nose. I'm kind of sick of spaghetti too, says my husband. Fine, but what do you all want instead? I don't care. I don't know. Whatever. I hate this game. I never win. What if we just order pizza? I turn in shock toward the middle child. Pizza? I don't have to lift a finger for pizza. Someone else cooks pizza. I don't have to do dishes. I don't have dishes to wash after pizza. My middle child waits for my response, her big brown eyes innocent of my previous frustration. She has now become my favorite child. Pizza it is, I say as I slam the fridge door and pick up the phone. What do you want on the pizza? Whatever.
Oh, good one.
Yay.
It's great because it's so true.
Oh, it's my everyday life. I say that all the time. I hate this game every time we do this every day. Every day.
All my kids are grown now, but we're doing that with Thanksgiving right now.
Oh.
Like planning Thanksgiving.
I love that you brought the prompt back at the end. It's a really, really good callback.
Thank you.
Leah says that your story feels so real. And Piper says that it's very true.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, I think that this is kind of fun because Jennifer, what is your very first line?
My very first line, I did not frame it. My very first line was, what should we have for dinner?
Yeah. And I think that that's my very first line too.
No way.
Of course. Yes. And of course I closed my window. So I'm trying frantically to bring my sprint up. Here it is. And
thank you, Shell.
What are we going to have for dinner tonight? So it's so funny because our pieces are very different, and I'll let everybody else be the judge of that. Shell is saying that your piece is very fun.
Yep. Thanks, also, Shell.
Jen, that was really good. And I hope that it'll go in some kind of a scrapbook in your, like Rhonda likes to say, creative nonfiction journal for your family to kind of look back on and see what life was like as mom, you know?
Right.
Oh, all right. Oh, hi, Rudy. We've got Rudy joining us again. That's nice to see. He's able to see us again on a Friday. All right. Well, I'll read my sprint next, and then we'll let Tina go. So it's not too much of my voice all in a row. And again, you'll see that I started off just like Jen. All right. What are we going to have for dinner tonight? He asked, standing at the fridge with the door open. See another element that is similar. Whatever. I regretted the harsh response the minute it was out of my mouth, not because of the word I had said, but because of the ones I had kept to myself. I'd wanted to say something along the lines of, whatever you're willing to cook, or whatever you can make from the meager ingredients displayed before you, but I'd managed to hold all of that in, and from the chipper way my husband whistled and scoot-stepped out of the way of my children, who came tearing through the kitchen at that exact moment, I realized my tone had been misinterpreted, if not as friendly, at least as not hostile. Well, I say we grill up some steaks, husband announced, clapping his hands and rubbing them together. Yes, steak, shouted my son. Ew, meat, proclaimed my daughter. crossing arms and poking out her tongue. I slammed the soapy sponge I'd been using to attack a pan that had been soaking on the counter for an uncountable number of days into the holder. Steak? Are you kidding me? This time there was no mistake in my tone. I could see the change in my husband's expression, from giddy glee to disappointed, shamed little boy in 2 seconds flat. I looked at my actual little boy and noticed his fists clenched in rage, a mouth pressed into a thin line. You never let us have anything good, he said, and slammed out the back door. My daughter skipped along behind him, and after a moment, I heard the sound of a basketball on the driveway and my daughter's naturally loud voice making some sort of request for a particular style of play. The air between my husband and myself had grown thick with tension. Why do you always do that? I snapped, filling the pan with water and putting it back into its apparent final resting place on the non-working rear burner of the stove. Do what? Disappoint our children? Shame their parent in front of them? Yes, you disappoint our children. All I did was propose an option for dinner, husband says, hands splayed, shoulders shrugging, once again playing the role of Our Lady the perpetual victim to a T. I shook my head and laughed derisively. Not this time, I say. I'm not letting you get away with that crap this time. What are you even talking about? The high pitch his voice always took at this point in our discussions was always what I thought might someday send me right over the precipice of insanity. You make claims like we're going to have steak dinner when you know well enough there isn't even money in the account to cover the mortgage this month. I keep telling you not to worry about that stuff. Well, who's going to worry about it then? I demand, in as patient of a tone as I can muster, crossing my arms. I want to fling them out to my sides and shout all of my responses, but I know doing so will give him what he wants, his out, his reason to pile the kids in the car and take them to eat somewhere far away from mean old mom. So you don't know what to make for dinner, and I make a suggestion, and now I'm in trouble. The scoffing and rolling eyes might be the thing that sets me off, I realize, and I see my own out for the situation. You know what? I need a break, I say. I slip into my shoes. What do you mean? He follows me as I head to the back door and grab the keys off the rack. I'm going to pick up some rice and beans at the Pick and Save, I say, but I know I'll polish off half an 8-piece fried chicken on the way back and bring the rest home for the kids. Husband hates fried chicken. He's at my elbow the whole way to the car, tries to dissuade the kids from clearing the driveway so I can exit it. But the kids are trained to respond to my commands, not his suggestions, so I'm on my way in a heartbeat. When I get to the lot of the supermarket, I see couples and families shoving heavy carts laden with bags across the parking lot. They are laughing, talking, holding on to ball caps against the sudden strong breeze. I find a place to park and sob into my hands.
That is so good, Jamie. All right, the whole time you're reading that, like, I know there are a lot of words, but the whole time I'm just like, I totally engaged. I totally understand this character. I feel her. Like, I don't know how you do it in such a small amount of words to get me so to the point where I just know this character. I know the situation. I know her feelings, like, just so well done. Leah puts it really well. She says so much tension, so great.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And I love the natural progression of, like, husband just doesn't get it, and she's trying to not be snarky, and how it just builds. Like, it's so real life.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Piper says, "Oh wow, so different from Jen's and equally so good."
Yeah, isn't that fun? And that's why we like to all write from the same prompt on Fridays, because of all of the different things that come out of the same prompt.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to see what Bambina did with this prompt also.
Yep. Real quick, Shell says so much emotion and character depth. Yep, agreed. Yep.
Thanks. Appreciate.
All right, Tina.
Okay, well, mine also involves dinner.
Oh my word.
But in a completely different way.
Awesome.
Than Jennifer and Jamie's. So here we go. The restaurant is that way, Serafina said. No, it's the other way, said Lorenzo. It can't be that way because you have to drive by Best Buy and that tax place first. And they're that way. Lorenzo pinched his fingers around his thumb and began to wave his hand at Serafina. You are confused. Home Depot and the tax place are the other way. The mall is that way. But the mall is after Best Buy and the tax place and the restaurant, argued Serafina. Mamma mia, exclaimed Lorenzo, turning left despite Serafina's insistence that it was to the right. Serafina crossed her arms. Well, don't start complaining when you have to turn around, she said. I told you it was the other way. Serafina could feel Lorenzo roll his eyes, even though she was purposely staring out the window. As they pulled up to the red light, Serafina saw the old closed-down amusement park through the opening between two strip malls. She sunk a little slower in her seat. Lorenzo sat up straighter. She just knew he was looking over at her every few minutes. She turned her whole body toward the window. When they pulled into Salvatore's, Lorenzo parked, turned off the engine, and turned to Serafina. You see, he said, sometimes you are not right. Serafina refused to look at the grin that she knew was on his face. Whatever, she said, putting her purse strap across her body. Just make sure when we go in you ask for a table by the window. Lorenzo came beside Serafina and offered her his elbow. Anything for the most beautiful woman I have ever laid eyes on. Serafina slipped her arm into his, and he held her hand with his free one, giving it a gentle squeeze. Her heart warmed, and she couldn't stop the smile from her face. What were they arguing about anyway?
Aww. I
so
love
sweet.
it.
Yay.
Aww. Piper says Serafina and Lorenzo, great names. I agree. Really great names. And I know exactly where you're writing about. I was like, okay, which restaurant is it going to be?
Well, in real life, it was Culver's, but I decided to move Salvatore's.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
So would this be the fantasy genre?
It could be nonfiction. Creative nonfiction if the husband had zero romantic bones in his body and the names were different.
Piper says that's so sweet. Agreed. So does Shell says the same thing. So sweet, Tina. Yeah, I thought that was really great. I love the characters. I love how you just took and made this argument between this couple just very endearing. And so we've all been there, all of us. Except for you're never really actually wrong, Tina. So
that's right.
That was it couldn't be.
Although that might have happened 2 days ago. We won't talk about that. I thought I was wrong, but I was mistaken. So there we go.
Jason says, I love each week seeing how you guys take the same prompt and use it in so different ways. Agreed. We love seeing what you guys do too. So please, every week take these prompts, spend 15 minutes to do it, and then tag us in it so we can see your work. We love watching what you guys can do with these as well. Because we're nothing special. We've said this from the beginning, we're nobody. We are nothing special. So if we can do this, you can do this. 15 minutes makes a big difference.
It'll help you prove to yourself that you can find the time to do a little bit of writing at least once a week. And if you're someone who's brand new to the concept of even calling yourself a writer, all you have to do to be a writer is write. Exactly. So here's your call to action for today. See if you can't do a 15-minute writing sprint. If you don't want to use this prompt, you can pick one up out of our 30 Days of Writing Sprints prompt book. It's only $10, or you can get a free virtual ebook copy if you sign up for our newsletter. And we've got 30 different prompts in there to help you hopefully establish a daily writing habit and get you all prepped up to write the big novel in November. Right.
And don't get discouraged if you think yours is a little not quite up to snuff, because this is episode 155. And so we have done this for at least 155 times.
Wow.
Plus, how many times every week do we finish and go ugh?
Yeah.
We don't like what we wrote, and then we read it and everyone's like, oh, that was so nice. So you just don't have, you're not reading it out loud on camera. So trust us, it is better than what you think.
Yeah. And another thing you could do is you could take the rough sprint that you do and then do an edit and then put a before and after on your writer's blog, just to kind of show people what can be done with a raw piece of work. And then that way you've got something on your blog for people to go and see.
All right.
Well, Leah's on us for saying that we're not nothing special. She's saying God gave us each a unique voice. So thank you, Leah. Yeah. That's very sweet. Appreciate it. All right. So let's move on to the final segment of our podcast, which is what's next. So we started this episode with what's up with each of us. Now we need to know what's next with each of us. What is next for you, Tina? What's next in your writing career? What's up?
I got to get these edits on book 2 done so I can get my book out by the end of the year.
Ooh,
I'm really coming down to the wire, and I need to get my butt in gear.
Now, you've talked about your book, but why don't you give us a solid plug for it? What's the name of it? Where can people find it?
Well, the tentative title is Alone in the Land of the Midnight Sun.
What's the book they can buy right now?
Right now is Lost in the Land of the Midnight Sun.
Okay. Available where?
Everywhere.
Available everywhere.
You can go to ChristinaCatane.com and buy it off my personal store. And you can go to Amazon. You can go to Barnes & Noble. You can go to Apple Books. Everywhere. I am wide.
And you have an audiobook available, don't you?
It is on Audible, yes.
Awesome. Okay, great. And you're going to do edits for the second book. Sorry. Now, what is that called? And get us excited for that.
The sequel to Lost is Alone in the Land of the Midnight Sun, where we watch Angelica, her journey after she has completed a quest from number 1, and just going to have a new quest to go on.
And are you writing book 3 as National Novel Writing Month? Is that going to be your project for now?
Probably not. I'm probably going to need to just do some serious editing because I don't see myself getting the editing done by November 1st, and I really need to get it done by the end of the year.
So your Nano project will be spending the time. You'll be spending that Nano time doing your edits.
Yeah, I just got so behind. I got stuck for a while, and then my laptop died, and I had to order a new one. And then it's just a pain in the butt getting a new laptop up and running. Mm-hmm. And so I lost a few weeks there. I went on vacation. Also, I wanted to say that I haven't looked at my reviews forever. Like I just stopped looking at them. And so I was watching a thing about marketing, and I just decided to go into Audible and see how many reviews that I had in Audible. And so I had quite a few new ones. And one of them, the lady said that she had listened to my Audible book like 3 or more times.
Wow.
And it was the best Audible book that she ever listened to.
Wow.
And a lot of that credit goes to Kimberly Messina, who is my narrator. Mm-hmm. I wanted to honor the Alaskan Native culture that is in my book. And so I really wanted an Alaskan Native to read and to be my narrator. And she just does an awesome job. So I just wanted to give her some credit there. Like, this lady was just like, this narrator, like, I don't have to wonder what character is what, because she does such a great job of differentiating their voices. And
that's the kind of reviews you want to hear about your narrator for sure. Jason Marsh in the chat is very excited for your second book, Tina. He's saying the first one was so good. So you got to get it done, at least for Jason, Tina.
No pressure.
All right. And what's next for Leah? Pioneers and Petticoats with Leah Benecki. She says what's next. She had a huge family drama yesterday. Fortunately resolved quickly, but was heart-shattering. She's planning to use those feelings to plot out the next book.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Well, we're sorry to hear you had some drama, Leah, but good for you for realizing that all of a writer's life can help us with our art. Maria Johnson, I'm so glad she reminded me because she had mentioned this to me this week. She is about to host a tweet chat called Friday Salon, #FrySalon, that starts at 4 p.m. her time, 11 a.m. our time. So immediately after this podcast, you'd be more than welcome to search the tag and join in. Also, she's going on a staycation. Yay. Yeah, I'm going to check out her writer salon since she's hosting this week. It was a good reason for me to be a little more active on Twitter. Blah, I'm so bad about that. Piper's what's next. She's researching drug rehab, DNA transference, midlife job choices, foster care system, and trying to put it into words. Wow. Throw all that stuff in a blender.
That'd be a good book.
Yeah, that's like, I want to read this.
Jason says his what's next. He's trying to finish his outline before November, so he's prepped for Nano. Unsure how much to put on the outline, though. You know what, Jason? You and me both. So I'm a pantser, but I find that my brain is wanting me to have some kind of a plan for this November. So I keep thinking maybe I want to have 30 bullet points and every day show up and write one of those 30 bullet points and all of this. So Jason, I'm right there with you trying to figure out how much I want to actually plot. but I begged God to show me how to start my book, and I think I have a start for my Nano. So my what's next? Yeah, I'm going to continue ruminating on my characters and ruminating on what I think my beginning, middle, and end is going to be, because right now I just have a concept for Nano. But I'm also working on edits because I have a short sci-fi series that is actually 4 books that are drafted, but 2 that are published. Second Chance by J.R. Nichols and Second Nature by J.R. Nichols are available anywhere you can find an ebook, and there are paperbacks for sale on Amazon. And I'm writing Second Sight right now while I'm editing it. And that is going to be probably novel length, which is really weird to have 2 shorts and then a long. But these are all standalones. If you like sci-fi/fantasy, it's real world with aliens coming into our world. And each book is a different alien race that comes to visit us and a different experience that each of these aliens has. And then in the 4th book, all of the aliens are reunited, and it's like a farcical, fun thing that happens. So if you like alien adventures, go check out Second Chance, go check out Second Nature, and hopefully by the time you get through with those, I will have the other 2 books in the series ready for you to gobble up with your readerly vision. Sign up for my newsletter to keep updated at writingshorts.net. Writing like writing a book, shorts.net. You'll get a free ebook when you subscribe. What's next for you, Jen?
Well, today my mother gets out of the rehab part of the hospital and she gets to come home.
Oh, that's going to be so good for her.
So good for her to get her back into her where she is comfortable, where things are like, familiar to her. Yeah. And so my what's next is I'm going to be spending a lot of time over at my parents' house, helping my dad out, trying to get my mom back established. And there'll be nursing coming in on the regular and trying to figure out what that looks like. But I am already all outlined and prepped for Nano. So the only thing I don't have done yet, because you guys know I keep saying this, I don't have my isolation booth done yet. So hoping to find some time. I can do that at my parents' house. I could take all that stuff over there and I could be at the table chatting with my mom while I do all that. So hopefully this week I can do that, because I just feel like it's just one of those things. I think it's a psychological thing for me. Like I have to have that to really feel like I'm prepped and ready. But so that's my what's next, is I'm just trying to find out what a new norm is for my mom and for me, like what role I will play in her care coming home. And then also trying to get that elusive isolation booth finished, because also on top of all that, my house is a wreck because of how life has been the past couple of weeks with my mom in the hospital. And my son and his new wife are coming home this next Friday. So boy. So I have a lot of work to do. So that's
it's really amazing how incredibly busy that you are, and you still make time to squeeze in your writing career when you can, Jen. And I know that you've been intentionally backing off. Yeah, it feels like you're missing it, which is healthy, right? That's a healthy way to feel about your writing. Instead of it feeling like this obligation and this burden, you're kind of craving to get back to it, right?
Agreed. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, that's a much better perspective to have. Okay, so I don't think we're missing anything from the chat, and we're a couple minutes over, so I guess that we're gonna end this episode. So
I just have one more comment. Yeah. Am I allowed to have a favorite out of your second books?
Sure.
Second Nature is my favorite. I just have to. Everybody has to read that one.
Yeah, it's really fun. That's a fun book. It's a raccoon who does sign language, just to give you a little bit of a hint. It's really fun. Okay, so I'm going to wrap us up here. That concludes this episode of the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. So until next week, may your pen be prolific. May your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ. Bye now.
Bye.